been coming to this area for 26 years now. And, you know, I guess thinking about what you're saying about the primal light and the original light of the dais, of the goddess, and I get the initial questions about who we are.
If you want to speak from the altar.
Yeah, that will fit.
I'll try it. You're going to have to rein in when you have time. So yeah, and the initial questions about who we all are, I guess come back to I am a part of the part that once was all. Part of the original void, the original darkness that gave birth to light. Supercilious light that now disputes with Mother Night, her ancient rank and lineage. There's this little issue that goes back to the dawn of time between, I guess, light and dark, between void and consciousness as to who created who. This little struggle between light and dark, and matriarchy and patriarchy, between solar and lunar forces, seems to have been going on an awful long time in various guises. So I figured I'd start with a little anecdote. I do a lot of walking, and a few years ago I was walking through a forest in Poland, a place called Vezniak, which was quite close to Dublin. I think the name Vezniak just translates as animal place or something. It was a big forest area, natural reserve. And out in the late afternoon, a big thunderstorm came on. And before the rain came, I saw there was an Orthodox church on a little island in the middle of the wood, and I thought I would go shelter under the porch. And during the storm, there was an old bag person who was sleeping in one corner of the porch, and a young communist, one of these sort of communist Boy Scouts, like a young pioneer, came with his trail bike and was waiting as well. And he was able to translate. And the old bag person laboriously in Polish tried explaining to me during the storm how here in Vezniak, how Mary Magdalene and Christ had come after the crucifixion, and how Christ and Mary Magdalene were buried there in Vezniak, a story I'd never heard before. And I started to try and tell him back in laborious English, you know, it's strange, it's the same where I come from. Because this is but of course he was adamant that she couldn't, Mary Magdalene couldn't possibly have come to the south of France, because they all knew that she'd come to Vezniak in Poland. And I believe that there's similar traditions in Kashmir, the notion that Christ died in Kashmir. Somewhere in Japan there is also a grave of Mary Magdalene and Christ. And obviously we'd all like to believe that Christ's feet actually trod on England's pastures green, and that Joseph of Arimathea had sailed over and landed on Glastonbury Tor in order to trade with the Tin Man. But I figure that ultimately it's a way of sacramentalizing the land, sacramentalizing a place that was sacred to begin with. 9 times out of 10, these are all magical places to start off with. The same thing goes on in Islam, where all over the Hindu Christian places there's magic rocks and magic mountains that the Prophet's grandson once got off their camel and stood on that rock. But again, the mountain or the rock was sacred before Islam. But it's a way of bringing the sacred places of the past into the present. I mean, I'd love to believe that it's all true, and that in 40 AD a ship without facilities, without oars or a rudder came from Jerusalem and came across the ocean and landed either in Marseille or Sainte Marie de la Mer, bearing Mary Magdalene and maybe Yeshua and maybe Martha and Martha's servant, Lazarus, the whole bunch of them. And of course, it's a fantastic festival at Sainte Marie de la Mer. And she was meant to have come here to Alets le Bain and to Rennes le Bain. And there's all kinds of theories about Pontius Pilate's wife owning land in the Rennes le Bain area and the Roman baths there. So I'd certainly like to believe that they trod on these very streets where before them Vestal hands had fed Aphrodite's doves, because here and also in Alets is the remains of a hexagonal temple consecrated to Isis. and the worship of the springs and the deess, the goddess in these places has been going on since time immemorial, which brings us to this issue of matriarchy in its primal sense, in that the definition of the word being mater, mater, matter, the first matter, what you'd call maybe in alchemy the prima materium, archetype, first, the primal, or the very first thing that begat the rest of creation. And certainly in ancient times, it would seem to me there's little doubt of the gender of the deity. I mean, I have around my neck a reproduction of a lady called the Dame de Brassempuy, the Lady of the Cap. She's about 25,000 years old. The original's carved from mammoth ivory. And I believe she's meant to be the earliest representation of the human face in art. And like a huge number of other white ladies, they've come out of the Pyrenees, out of the caves of the Ariège and the Ardèche, out of the Paleolithic period, where there's the first images created by human beings are images of this deess, this mother figure, which is maybe the very first thing that anyone expressed. Maybe it's even pre-lingual, or certainly way before recorded history came along. But we have these relics, these pieces, all of them female, all of them variants of the female form. And she is I guess the goddess, the deess that begat the later edifications. There were different deesses that have come generation after generation out here, like the Ibero-Celtic Baal or Belisama, the folk who came later. By Druidic times, by the times of the Celts and the Gauls, we had here a sun god, Belanos, who was male, and a moon goddess, Belisama, or Belisna. Her name variously translates as bright, or shining, or shining one, or maybe summer bright. And yeah, Belisama was the moon lady, who was the bride of Belanos, and yeah, worshipped in ancient times on the high mountains and in the caves. So there was this culture of, I guess, of goddess worship that came before the Cathars, that came before the Torah, before the Bible, and I think prepared the way out here, prepared the soil. It's one of the reasons why Catharism took root out here, because people were already that way inclined, and there was already a very strong stream of, I guess, matriarchal thought. By the 12th century, people were taking their mothers' names. Women could inherit land, serve as priests, and command armies, which was pretty much unique in the world at that time, or at least unique in Europe. And it's out of this milieu that Esclarmonde de Foix, Esclarmonde, arises, this Cathar priestess who's been name-checked here a few times today. Probably the most famous of the high priestesses. In that period, in the 12th century already, there was also something called the Courts of Love, which was a form of, basically, chivalry was the way that everything was resolved, and chivalry was an important thing at that point in time. And the laws of chivalry were actually adjudicated like any law, whether people behaved honourably or not, whether a knight behaved honourably. A knight that was true in heart was supposedly would never fail in single combat. And these laws of chivalry were not only adjudicated, but there were degrees of chivalry in the 9th and 12th century. Yeah, like in Freemasonry or any kind of mystery tradition. And according to the knight's behaviour, they were promoted up the various ranks from precador to fegnador to intendador to drut, the different stages of chivalry, and these were adjudicated by something they called the Courts of Love. Around here, the Courts of Love sat in the castle of Puivert and Cabaret, and it was kind of a spiritual Freemasonry that all the noble ladies of the land would get together once or twice a year to decide whether people had behaved honourably, to rule on specific cases. But it was also kind of a formalised sort of gossip session or a cafe clash that enabled all of the countesses and the different noblewomen to get together at least once a year to kind of decide on how the society was being run and whether different relationships were being conducted. According to the books, and they had books, multiple chivalry books that they looked back to. There was a high priestess or a chatelaine who was in charge of the courts of love, much like a grand master in a Masonic lodge. And with the summonses that would go out to the different ladies to come together and decide what was going on, I guess it was very much like a cross between Freemasonry and jury service. They would all get together in the morning, they would hear the complaints, then they would break for a very long lunch. There would be troubadours and more gossip, and then they would reconvene in the evening, and a verdict would be passed down as to whether someone had behaved honourably or not, and whatever was being brought before them. So this was an actual a system that ran for hundreds of years, that was started by Eleanor Aquitaine, I think, founded the tradition. Here in Cabaret and Quiver, the courts of love continued until the early 13th century. And so it was an atmosphere which I guess wasn't, if not matriarchal, was at least a world where it was a level playing field, or close to it. Because there was also sort of a democracy at that point in time in the 12th century. They had elected magistrates called capitouls who were actually elected by the people who acted as a check on the powers of the aristocracy, so that the aristocrats didn't have 100% control. And unfortunately, a very enlightened culture was also the reason why there was such a large Jewish population, because they were not persecuted here in the south, and this enabled the great books, the Kabbalah, the Zohar, and the Bahia to be written. And the same atmosphere of, premature liberalism or premature democratic values is the same reason that Catharism was able to take hold and take off. The Cathars were not initially persecuted. And Gnostic dualism seems to have been introduced into this part of the world in the late 12th century by the Bogomils. The aforementioned boggers or buggers, which come from bog is the old name for God in that part of the world. Mill is for love. They were the beloved of God, and thus from the name bog we get our modern English word buggery. And so it was the Bogomils, and one of the Bogomils, the Bogomil priest of Bishop of Constantinople, Nicetas or Nicetea, who fell out with his fellow Bogomils in the mid-12th century and was basically fled the Caucasus, walked all the way across to Toulouse, and showed up in Toulouse bearing with him this sacred text, this book which is known as the Book of Nicetas or the Book of Love. Some people call it the Book of the Seven Seals. The curious grimoire or Gnostic Bible that was brought here in the late 12th century. Lots of different theories about it. Nobody knows what the book was. In the early part of the 20th century, it was fashionable to think it was the Lost Gospel of St. John, which has subsequently been found and is now available on the internet. More recently, it's been fashionable to say it's another Gospel of Mary Magdalene, but no one is really sure what the contents of the book brought by Nicetas to Toulouse was, except that it started the formal consolidation of the what we've come to know as the Cathar faith. I think they just thought of themselves as Christians or good people. And as we were saying earlier, Cathar isn't a word that they would use. It's somewhere between the Greek catharsis and the German curse keta for black cat, or something that the Crusaders might have used, or kafir, which is a term commonly used during the Crusades for basically anyone who wasn't a Muslim or wasn't a Christian. In South Africa, we still call black people Kafirs. In Afghanistan, Catharism is where the people who are not Muslims, the tribal pagan people, come from. And Kafir has always been an insult or a fight word used by people of the book, or people of the three main monotheisms, towards the other strange ones who don't partake of the same rites. So, 12th century rapid growth of the Cathar Church, which happens to find fertile territory here in Esclarmonde. There is this figure who manages to effortlessly straddle an ancient pagan tradition and a Gnostic Christian tradition. She is at once a Gnostic Christian priestess, but also in some ways the living embodiment of the deess, of the goddess, the protective spirit of the land. This figure that I think of as the White Lady, or the Dame Blanche, the Pyrenees, who previously has found expression in maybe the Roman Artemis or Minerva with her shield and breastplate, the guardian mother who protects the freedom of her children, and who's also the ancestor of the bare-breasted lady who leads the people, the sans-culottes, to the barricades in the French Revolution, or the ancestor of the Statue of Liberty, who supposedly guards the liberty of the Union. So there's always been this deess. I think of her as the White Lady. She has an antithesis, which I don't have time to talk about now. We think of as the Black Mother or the Black Madonna. Both are strongly connected to the land. You'll always find them close to sources or springs, magical sources. They're very connected to the land, to the way the land renews itself. And miracles of the White Lady, apparitions of the Virgin, usually happen around these different sources, and there's dozens of them in the area, not just Lourdes, but places like Notre Dame de Vals-de-Mort, the source of the apparition of Celle, different sites where people have seen apparitions of this glowing feminine form, which has been going on for a very, very long time. Like even at Lourdes in the Grotto of Massabielle, when Bernadette Soubirous saw the White Lady, she didn't know what to think of it at first and tried to keep it secret from her family. Initially she thought it was maybe a demon or a ghost, and tried throwing holy water at it to make it go away. And she didn't tell her mum until her sister ratted her out, and then her mum beat the hell out of her, and then she explained the whole thing, and then the father found out and beat them up, and it was just a complete mess. But it took a while before they finally got it to the priest, and they finally rationalised it as being an apparition of the BVM, and found a way of slotting it into the established tradition. But this problem of children and different seers and people encountering these apparitions, and usually the hallmarks are the same. There's certainly an olfactory hallmark, which is something I would call the smell of sanctity. There's a smell which is something like roses or lilies, rose bay, tree sap, very sweet, maybe a slight edge of almonds to it, very overpowering. A strong sense of being outside of time, of not knowing whether it's day or night anymore, which is a curious thing, being in the middle of the night and thinking the sun is shining, or not know a sense the sun is falling, or. But yeah, similar hallmarks down through the ages. So I would suggest that this was always a tradition of the place, and that Esclarmonde de Foix, the Cathar priestess, was maybe an expression of this. Her name, Esclarmonde, means light of the world, or possibly derives from the French éclair for lightning bolt. Foix, or Foix in Catalan, is faith. So from the beginning she's got a ridiculous name for light of the world of the faith, in that it seems like she was chosen or marked from the very top to be the emblem of the Cathar faith. And she actually lived a full life as a wife and mother who was married to a fairly brutal aristocrat, the Viscount de Gimoes, and mothered about 5 children for him. And only after the Viscount died did she take the cloth in a ceremony at Fangio, and at which point she was probably in her late 40s or early 50s at the time she embarked on her apostasy. And her main task was that she was a devout pacifist, as the Cathars were, and a very, very saintly woman. Her main task was that she wanted to educate women. She was against the notion that they were either being married off for their dowries or parked in convents, and wanted to create schools and women's homes. So she could, an equivalent of Cathar convents, I guess. But a similar problem exists in Afghanistan and other parts of the world as well, where women were treated like furniture, or basically used to cement deals or to cement alliances. And when that didn't work out, we're sort of in the way and parked off in convents. So Esclarmonde did a lot to try to educate people. before the Crusade. Then when in the immediate run-up to the Crusade, to the attack on the south, she tried famously arguing with the papal legates. Initially, the papacy tried to talk the Cathars around and sent different envoys here to try and plead with them to change their ways or be exterminated. At one of these early conferences, at the conference at Pamiers, Esclarmonde attempts to argue with the papal legates and is shouted down and told to go back to her distaff, go back to her spinning, which is one of the last times that she squarely enters recorded history. No one knows when she died. She's supposed to have lived a very long time. The poet Maurice Mark describes her face as having as many lines and wrinkles as the South had martyrs. In 1205, the high priestess Esclarmonde de Foix has a vision of impending apocalypse, that something very bad is coming down the pike, and goes and seeks out the young lord of Montsegur, Raymond de Foix, who was 17 years old at that point in time. And in 1205, the aging high priestess tells him to go fortify those old ruins at the top of the mountain and get ready, which, and funded by the de Foix dynasty, because Esclarmonde de Foix was the countess, the lady of the land, and her brother Roger Ramon was the Count of Foix and the warlord, the leader of the area. They were able to channel the funds to them to begin the restoration of Montsegur. They began getting ready for the siege of Montsegur, but it was about one generation before it happened. It took another 35 years, more or less, for the siege to actually happen. But during that time, Raymond de Foix was able to rebuild the castle, create systems, and create granaries, and get ready for the battle that was coming. It's believed that during the last part of the Crusade, that Esclarmonde de Foix and the Cathar leadership probably relocated to Montsegur. Their deaths are not recorded. We do not know what happened to Esclarmonde de Foix or to Guillaume de Castries, the last formal head of the Cathar Church. All we know is that Guillaume de Castries writes a letter to Raymond de Foix, the Lord of Montsegur, towards the end of the Albigensian Crusade, the so-called Cathar Wars, saying, please can we come and take shelter in your castle and bring with us the treasures of our faith, allegedly including this the book, the Book of Love, or this Book of Nisitas, this Book of the Seven Seals that would not be opened till Judgment Day. So we know that Guillaume de Castries and also at least Archbishop Tento from Aachen went to Montsegur at the end with the treasures of their faith. None of them are on the list of people that were the Inquisition took down at the end of the siege. When the castle fell on March 16th, 1244, the Inquisition made careful notes and depositions from everyone in the castle and took the lists and the names of everyone that was there. Esclarmonde de Foix and Guillaume de Castries do not appear on this list, so widely assumed by historians to be dead at some point before March 16th, 1244. The myth is that when the castle falls, according to the myth, Esclarmonde's meant to have transformed herself into a dove. The myth is that she climbed the Tabor, the mountain overlooking Montsegur, the mountain of transfiguration, and transformed herself into a dove, the living emblem of the faith. And the myth has it that the dove splits the mountain of its beak, and the sacred treasure is thrown into the mountain which closes around it, and the dove flies away, and it becomes the living symbol of the faith. And in this tradition, Esclarmonde de Foix never died, but was transfigured, like the prophet Elijah, or like Yeshua himself, that she somehow passed alive into the kingdom of heaven. In the museum at Montsegur are two skeletons that are not named. They're both found hidden in the bottom of a shaft out of the castle, about 75 feet beneath the summit. It's a man and a woman. I don't know the age of the man. The woman's skeleton's about between 70 and mid-80s, which can be seen from the arthritis and the way that the sutures in the skull have grown together. Whoever they were hidden very, very carefully from the Crusaders in a shaft that was dug during the siege. The Cathar leadership and the defenders had reason not to allow their dead to fall into the hands of the Christian Crusaders, who believed in physical resurrection at Judgment Day at the end of time. And thus, if they could get your corpse after you're dead, would mutilate your body or scatter your heretic dust to the four winds. So there were reasons to hide them. So we figured that whoever they were pretty important. The female skeleton has a piece of a spearhead embedded in her hip. So we have to assume that she was gored to death with a spear. Probably a strong symbol of the patriarchal forces they were up against. The man has a piece of an arrowhead in his spine and was probably shot in the back with a crossbow or some kind of longbow. Whether that man was the last head of the Cathar Church, whether that's the skeleton of Esclarmonde de Foix, we will never know. The historic Esclarmonde vanishes out of the pages of history. But, and I have to really speed along here, unfortunately, but the curious thing about our Esclarmonde, our Esclarmonde, is that there wasn't just one of them, like our Marys. There were multiples. Because zooming into the historic record, there are two other Esclarmondes in the castle as well at the same point in time. Not just Esclarmonde de Foix, the aging high priestess, but the second Esclarmonde, Esclarmonde d'Alien, was in fact the niece of the first Esclarmonde. The second generation, Esclarmonde d'Alien was the illegitimate daughter of Esclarmonde the First's brother. Esclarmonde's brother, Roger Ramon, was a tremendous character who single-handedly kept the Crusaders out of the Ariège for the whole of his life, and was pretty much undefeated in every single battle, fought throughout the crusade in insane battles, and had a great singing voice apparently too. A very, very fierce man. He burned Fangio, where the Dominicans were founded, and allegedly rode his horse into the burning church and tilted at the step of the cross on the far wall of his lance, while yelling at Christ to save himself. He also went to Rome and argued with the Pope. So Roger Ramon, the brother of this first Esclarmonde, at some point in the beginning of the 13th century, again around 1205, was on a wolf hunt in the Ariège. Got lost in the woods after killing the wolf and ended up at the door of a convent in a place called Solenque, banged on the convent door to demand admittance. During the night, impregnated the abbess, who then begat illegitimate twins. The daughter was called after the aunt Esclarmonde, and was the second Esclarmonde de Foix, commonly known as Esclarmonde the Bastard, because, or Esclarmonde l'Amoureuse, because unlike her saintly aunt, the second Esclarmonde was not an initiated Cathar high priestess, but instead was, the bastard daughter of her brother, and Esclarmonde's brother. The other kid was a character called Loup de Foix, Wolf von Foix, who was named after the father's exploit on the night of the conception. But I don't have time to go into the history of Loup or Wolf, except to say that the second Esclarmonde the Bastard, was not a pacifist. During the Albigensian Crusade, she donned man's armour and took up a sword to fight. She allegedly organised the shepherds to roll down rocks on the Crusader army as they came through the valleys, and turned her castle in Usson into a staging post for the refugees escaping from Montsegur and for the supplies going in, and is said to have personally relieved the siege many times. So, in her case, a very fierce woman, apparently very beautiful, described by the poet Maurice Marg as the living incarnation of youth and freedom. Esclarmonde d'Alien, also not celibate. Again, supposedly took many lovers, to again quote Maurice Marg, many a night dreamed of this ardent girl, and because she overflowed with passion, she gave herself to more than one of them, beside her horse and her sword in the shade of the Pyrenean pines. So a very different figure from the first Esclarmonde. She was maybe 38 at the time of the siege. Then the third Esclarmonde, Esclarmonde de Foix, the daughter of Raymond de Foix, the lord of the castle. Raymond had 3 daughters. And unfortunately, in the Cathar story, one very problematic thing is all the men are called Raymond. Like pretty much everyone in the story is called Raymond first, second, third. It's Raymonds of Toulouse, Raymonds of Carcassonne, Raymonds of Montsegur. I think it was for a title of the name, like the true man or the true leader of Rayman or Raymond of, but there's just multiples, which makes it really hard to penetrate, especially when it's moving rapidly. But yeah, Raymond de Foix, 17 years old when Esclarmonde first told him to start fortifying the place, an old man by the time the siege actually happened, had 3 daughters. The oldest daughter was Philippa, the middle daughter Arpax, the younger daughter Esclarmonde de Foix, the third Esclarmonde. This third Esclarmonde was maybe 9 or 10, possibly 12 or 13 at the outside at the time of the siege. So she was still a child. This third Esclarmonde is the only one of the 3 to perish at the stake. On the list of 260 martyrs, this Esclarmonde de Foix is one of them. A lot of people wonder why a child burned at the stake, and think it must be crazy for a child to believe in something so much that they refuse to recant or prefer to go into the flames. But as the consolamentum was generally given as a final rite, a supreme unction, I suspect she was already dying. I suspect that by March, she was probably unconscious or may have been dying of hypothermia or was in a condition where they'd already given her the consolamentum and thought she was going to go. Possibly she was too sick to recount. Her mother burned with her Corba, because I think Corba didn't want to give up her child and refused to let her go on her own. But yeah, Esclarmonde de Foix, the third of the 3 Esclarmondes, perishes on the fire when at the end of the siege they're given the option of either recounting or dying. Strangely enough, most of the military figures in the garrison escaped, or the ones who are not Cathars succeeded in leaving. But that's kind of another story. What I want to concentrate on is the manner in which, if you look at these 3 historic personages, first there's Esclarmonde de Foix, whose face had as many lines and wrinkles as the Southhead martyrs, a pacifist and incredibly saintly. Then the second one, Esclarmonde d'Allion, who's fierce and in her prime and armed and sexually active. And then the third one, Esclarmonde de Foix, just an innocent child who may not even have been conscious of what was happening, who was martyred on the Camp de Cremat. But I think that all 3 together clearly are the aspects of the threefold goddess. All 3 together form a kind of Montsegurian trinity. They are conflated over the course of 7 centuries into a single figure, into Esclarmonde de Montsegur, the guardian of the Grail. A lot of people find it strange that Esclarmonde de Montsegur is depicted so often with a spear or a breastplate when we know the historic Esclarmonde was a pacifist. But there's a bundling together and a fusion of these 3 characters. And somehow in this fusion, this is also for me an image of Belisama, the warrior goddess, who was always there, and to some extent it was always her temple up there. And whether that place shielded the Holy Grail and whether it shielded the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, it's a moot point. I'm not sure what a Grail honestly is. There's so many definitions of it that maybe the Holy Grail is ultimately the promise that somehow at the end of time there will be some kind of reconciliation between these matriarchal and patriarchal forces. That maybe it's the marriage of the sun and the moon, I think what Christ and Mary Magdalene symbolize anyway, the harmonization of opposites, which is sort of the goal of alchemy. So yeah, it's a little step into that. What happened after the fall of the castle and the destruction of the place was basically 7 centuries of silence. The place was suppressed. It was cursed by successive papacies who actually had a sort of papal voodoo called an anathema, and it was anathematized for centuries. The locals were punished every year on March the 16th and were forced to drag a cross through the streets every March the 16th and repeat the words of the Vini Creator Spiritus, the song they sang.